to talk about scallops. Let me get my things together. I want to make an introduction. This is Dave Williams. Dave Williams and our company goes back more than about 20 years now, I guess. We had a mutual friend from New Zealand, Roger Crossman, who put us in contact with Dave about 15 years ago to start to develop the scallop business. Roger's not here with us today, but Dave is. I just want to thank Dave for being here. And I wanted to introduce Andy DeBoer, my father's brother. Andy started working with us about 2 years ago in fresh fish sales, and he handles the Fruge account. Andy and I both grew up working on fishing boats and working at Lunds fisheries in the plant. We know the place from soup to nuts. Andy in particular spent, up until 2 years ago, was a commercial fisherman, spent a lot of time scalloping. I spent a lot of time fishing, gill netting, and trolling. You couldn't pay me enough money to go scalloping. Andy's done it all. If you guys have any questions about being on the water or anything like that, you can reach out to Andy, and he'll be happy to answer those questions when we're done. Your system here. So I pretty much went over some specifics about our company. We are, again, a primary producer and processor. Sustainable fisheries are key to the success of our business. Without sustainable fish stocks, our fishing vessels that we own and our factories would not be able to continue. So we're very active in the management role of all the fisheries, especially scallops, and I'm going to primarily talk about that today. I hope I don't bore you guys to death tonight, but I'll run you through it. So this is a list of species that we produce. There's a couple scallop species there that I threw in there, MSC certified species that we import as well. But scallops, summer flounder, black sea bass, scupper, porgy, which is a pretty popular item right now in the Northeast, because most recently the stock has been considered fully rebuilt, and there's a very high volume fishery there, so it's a very readily available fish. Atlantic croaker, butterfish, spot, mackerel, herring, nuthaven, volleyball squid, helix squid, Cape shark, California squid. That's just a few of the items. We are an SQF approved facility, which is a third-party audit to the government food inspection, the FDA. So that gives us a little bit more clout with some of the vendors, or with some of the customers that we deal with. Okay, so we'll get into sea scallops here a little bit. If anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me at any point and just shoot. So the Atlantic sea scallop fishery is managed under the United States Department of Commerce, NOAA. NOAA back in 1977 was formed back in 1977 due to the Magnuson Fisheries-Stevens Act, which created a 200-mile limit around the border of our country, which basically eliminated foreign fishing and made our fisheries all domestic fisheries. With that, there's 8 regional councils set up. One of those councils, I'm sure maybe 2 of those councils serve the halibut and salmon industries. But we deal with two of those councils on the East Coast. And that's the New England Fisheries Management Council and the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council. Those councils are active year-round and help set up fisheries management plans, review science on the fisheries, and help establish these fishing quotas that our fishing vessels are fishing against. So down at the bottom right-hand corner is FishWatch. FishWatch is a newly developed website developed by by NOAA that has been put in place to educate the public about the fisheries that we're fishing. Some of you may be familiar with Monterey Bay Aquarium's fish list, or not fish watch yet. We as industry members live and die by the regulations that come out of National Marine Fisheries Service. We are active in that. We do a lot of cooperative research with National Marine Fisheries Service to make sure that stock assessments are correct and that the harvests that we're fishing against, the quotas that we're fishing against are good. Some of these other sites and publications that you may see, are only as good as the funding that is provided to them. There were Atlantic sea scallops at one point was on Monterey Bay Aquarium's site as being red, and in fact, the Atlantic sea scallop fishery for the past 10 years has not been considered overfished at all, and overfishing is not occurring. It's one of the most successfully managed scallop resources in the world. So we really encourage people to use Fish Watch as a guide and as an educational tool for your consumers. Again, like I said, we're working with the New England Fisheries Management Council and the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Council. I put this slide up just to show you guys that the species that New England and Mid-Atlantic councils manage. The New England Council is going to manage your Atlantic sea scallops, your northeast multi-species, Atlantic herring, red crab, skates, Atlantic salmon, some things that you guys probably aren't familiar with there. And then the Mid-Atlantic Council is your mackerel, squid, butterfish, summer flounder, sea bass, scaup, bluefish, tilefish. Jeff Galen, I slid him in the middle there. Our company actually belongs to Fisheries Survival Fund and Garden State Seafood Association. There are two associations that lobby the councils and lobby National Marine Fisheries Service to ensure that we maintain access to our resources. And Jeff Galen, who works for us as a full-time employee, handles all of our government relations, and he actually has a seat at the Mid-Atlantic Council and is a liaison from the New England Council, which helps us with our scallop, helps us manage our scallop resource and helps our fishing vessels operate successfully. So as far as Atlantic sea scallop management is concerned, our fishing season starts March 1 and ends February 28th. It's what we call limited access fishery. So there's a specific number of permits, which I'll show you in the next slide. So no other permits, no other fishermen can come into this fishery unless they buy an existing permit. Each of the vessels that participate in the fishery have a limited number of crew on board. So when they go out to sea, they can only, some boats have 5 men on board, some boats have 7 men on board, and their harvest is really related to how many scallops they can cut on board, because what we receive shoreside is only the muscle, the scallop meat. There's a series of regulations that have been put in place over the past 15 to 20 years that have made this fishery sustainable. One of them is a 4-inch ring diameter on our chain bag, which I'll show you shortly, which allows small scallops to escape. We've recently put in a specialized dredge, which has minimized sea turtle interactions in the fishery, which has been a big deal in the environmental community. And our fishery operates on a days at sea and a rotational access area, which I'll get more in depth. And then, I'm not following myself, I'm sorry. And then the last point here is this website, which if any of you want to write it down or want to send it out to you. This is NIMS's website that gives you all the details, National Marine Fisheries Service website. You can go on here and you can find all these details that I put on here, all the slides and whatnot, photos, everything's available. So this is the 2014 scallop fishery allocation. On the top you'll see research set aside quota, which is taken out. Well, first we start with about 67 million pounds is what the government allocated this year as an overfishing limit. So we fish anywhere up to that limit, they're going to consider the fishery overfished. They've created a annual catch limit of 45 million pounds and an attack. And I don't expect all you guys to understand all these numbers, but I guess with this slide, what I really wanted to point out was that number one, all of this quota from the top, there's a research set aside that is taken off of about 1.2 million pounds of scallops every year. That 1.2 million pounds, 1.25 million pounds of scallops is given to fishermen to harvest aside from their allocation, and 30 to 40% of the money generated from those scallops goes back into cooperative research between the government and fishery participants. One unique thing in our fishery, our boats have to call in 72 hours in advance before they leave the dock to fish, and they are, at that point, they may be designated an observer, a federal fisheries observer. So they basically have someone that comes on board the vessel for the trip, and they'll watch everything that comes on, and they'll log all the data, size of scallops, bycatch, sea turtle interactions, and anything that may be of importance to the science, to the fishery. They'll log all that and bring that back and report it to the government, and then match it up to what the fishermen are saying when the observer is not on board. This slide here will show you where the scallops that we're harvesting are coming from by pounds, and I'll give you a map of where these areas are. But essentially, this year we have open bottom days, and we have scallops coming from closed area 2, Nantucket Lightship, and the Delmarva, and I'll get into a little bit more detail with that in a second. So here's here's the map of the Atlantic coast. You can see Cape May, New Jersey on your left-hand side, and then you can see some shaded areas up and down the coast. Starting from the bottom, we have the Delmarva area, the Elephant Trunk, the Hudson Canyon, Nantucket Lightship, and then closed area 1. And these are what we call access areas inside in the scallop fishery. They're imaginary lines drawn in the ocean, and each year, depending on stock surveys, we will open and close those areas. So this year, like I said, we have product coming from Delmarva, from the Nantucket Lightship, and closed area 2. Closed area 1, Hudson Canyon, and Elephant Trunk are actually closed this year. So those scallops are in there, they're not being touched, nobody can fish there, they're growing, and depending on the surveys, when the government and the cooperative research that we participate in says that those scallops are healthy enough and large enough to go and harvest, we'll go and harvest them. That's one section, that's one portion of our fishery. The other portion is all the other blue area around that, which we call open bottom. And the fishermen are allocated at days at sea. So this year we were fishing against 31 days at sea. So as soon as you can see that this thin line here, There's a 2-mile line that runs along the coast, and that's what we call demarcation line. So when the fishing vessel leaves the inlet, he crosses that 2-mile line. He has a little black box on top of his wheelhouse called a VMS system, vessel monitoring system, that is linked to the government. And when they cross that line, their clock starts ticking. So if they leave from Cape May and they want to fish up behind Cape Cod, let's say, and it takes them 24 hours to get there, that's 24 hours steam time that they're charged with, that they cannot produce or harvest scallops because they're steaming to the grounds. Then they start fishing and then they steam back to Cape May. So they've lost 48 hours, but anyhow, that's all part of their days at sea. So it's a maximum of 31 days at sea, and between that and the access areas that they've had this year, they had 2 access area trips, like I said, where everybody had 1 trip to Delmarva, and then they had a choice to go to either Nantucket Lightship or access area 2, which they could take 12,000 pounds from each of those areas. Jumping back to days at sea, it's a wide open fishery when they're in the open bottom. So as fast as the guys can cut, as good a captain that you have on the boat catching the scallops, you can cut as much meat as you want in the open area during that 31 days. In the rotational areas, it's limited how much meat you can remove from that area. This is I threw this up as the anatomy of the scallop. This picture to the left was actually a little video that would show you how the scallops are shucked. I'm not sure that we can get that going, but you can see there's eyes, gills, mantle, all the different piece, the anatomy of the scallop. But what everybody else, what you all see at the restaurant level is just that white meat. A lot of other countries, the roe is favored, and the scallops are harvested with the roe on. But here in this country, because of our management plan, it's impossible for us to do it because it's all about producing scallop meat. The fishermen are paid by how much meat they bring to the dock, and that's how they're compensated. So if they were to harvest the scallop with the roe on, it would slow down the process and they wouldn't be able to cut anywhere near as much quantity per trip. This is the catch history for the past 3 years in the scallop fishery, and you can see the 2012-13 season we harvested almost 51 million pounds of scallops, and due to the science and the buy-in from the fishermen, we all agreed that it was best for us to reduce the quota during 2013 and 2014. And so we went through a 35% reduction in production last year, and we lost about another 10% this year. Year to date, we went from 50 to 34, we're down to 23. Year to date right now, we'll probably finish up somewhere around 27 to 28 million pounds for the season. With that said, I think this coming year we'll see a similar season that we did in 2014-15 season, and I think our 2016-17 season, we'll see numbers back up in the 35 to 50 million pounds based on current surveys and the amount of seed, the small juvenile scallops that we're seeing out in the ocean now. This is just a chart I put together which shows you our harvest year to date, Lunds Fisheries, between the boats that we own and the independent owner-operators that pack with us, which is about 15 boats in total. We'll harvest about 1.4 to 1.6 million pounds of scallops this year. We are a boutique scallop producer, if you could say, compared to other scallop producers in the New England area. And this chart will show you not only when it may be when prices may be soft, but it also gives you an indication of what sizes are doing during the year as well. This year, the majority of our production was produced in April, May, and June, to whereas previous years we would see more heavier production in March, April, May, when scallop boats had more days at sea, or they had more access areas. So that's going to fluctuate from year to year, but I think on the average, it's safe to say that the peak of our fishery is going to be between April, May, and June, for the primary reason that it comes down to yield in our fishery. So our scallops, when we're fishing in March during the cold water, that's when the scallops are healthiest, and they start to spawn usually by late June. So the scallops are really plump, and fishermen have to cut a lot less scallops to get a pound, basically. Whereas later in the year, like this time of the year, they're cutting a lot more scallops, and the meats are a lot softer, and because they've already spawned out. That's pretty much the presentation on the Atlantic sea scallops. We also import scallops from the Faroe Islands, which is most people would consider like a bay scallop. It's 40 to 60, 60, 80, 80, 120 count. There's one boat that is given a license in the Faroe Islands. It's an MSC certified fishery. It's a wonderful scallop compared to any other bay scallop that you're going to find because it's caught in cold water. Most of the bay scallops that you generally see are warm water, farm-raised species. And then also we import a lot of Hokkaido scallops from northern Japan, and with our fishery production in our fishery being down the past 2 years, you see a lot of Hokkaidos on the market filling the trend for large scallops. And aside from that, we produce a lot of summer flounder, which I know is a popular item down here in the south, and ship a lot of fresh product. You have to answer any questions about any of those items.
Sure, go ahead. Okay, real quick summary. I'm the impolite version of everything that happens in here. So anything I'm likely to say comes with the government health warning, okay? Basically, Lunds Fisheries is a producer and a packer of scallops. There's very few of those. So you get everything directly from the source, and we have chosen the best distributor we can find, which is Fruge Seafood. Our product is minimally processed. If you've ever seen a scallop that's been dredged up, it is covered with all sorts of sand and detritus and, dare I say, crap from everywhere. It has to be cleaned, it has to be washed. We put it in a can, we ship it down to you. That's the best thing we can do. We expect you guys to take that product and produce something majestic. That's what we're trying to do. Does anybody know what the scallop meat is actually? It's actually the same thing that you cut to open up an oyster. It's the adductor muscle. Scallops spend their lives swimming around for God knows what reason. That's why they're sort of supercharged with this huge adductor muscle. And God's made it really good to eat, and we expect you guys to do wondrous things with it. I can ask any questions about anything, but the simple summary is you have a great product, you have a great distributor, we expect you guys to do wondrous things, and I hear wonderful comments back from these guys about our product. That's a simple summary. If anybody wants to beat me up over anything, I'm available for questions later or questions now. So if anybody has any questions, if you can stump me, I'll kick you in there. No. If you can stump me, I'm sure Richard has a prize for you. Any questions?
Do you get your own T-shirts that you ask and answer your own question?
That is actually a rhetorical question.
And the butt kicking line starts in the back. So who we got?
So broken scallops. You know,
yes,
you get a gallon of scallops, and you've got you know, 3 or 4, 5, 6 dozen, whatever, that are broken, cut in half? How does that happen?
Well, what actually happens is we have a situation where scallops tend to be quite delicate. Certain times of year, they're not as strong as other times of year. It's due to roe production. You know, if you're interested in sex, you're not interested in keeping your body up. So at that point in time, they tend to be more sensitive. Now, what we do is we try to put absolutely perfect... Come on, guys, it's serious. We try putting absolutely perfect scallops into a container. That container, if it goes by truck, tends to be treated quite nicely because it's cobbled in ice and stuff like that. If you put that container on an aeroplane sometimes, you end up with a Neanderthal picking it up and dropping it a few times. Hence you get broken scallops. Now we do have sometimes problems with cracks on the top of the scallop. That's something you can't really avoid, particularly when the scallop is, like I say, somewhat shagged out. But you can deal with that problem fairly easily. Okay? So that you do get that type of situation occurring. If it's a transit problem, I will work with Fruge and try and help out. But usually it's a transit problem as opposed to a product problem.
Cool, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's that? The special term for shagged out?
I'm trying to be polite.
So you guys were talking about how the fishermen are allocated different areas, like you have the Nantucket region, then you have the areas in between. Are there any difference in quality between like the allocated areas and just the in-between areas?
You know, I think that's...
How about that?
And
I bring in my number two.
I personally think sometimes there is a difference. I think the scallops that are coming from the northern region are usually a little bit deeper, colder water, rocky bottom. They seem to be, the shells are different. They ask you that, you cut the shells in the mid-Atlantic area, they're more of a wafer size, but or quality. Up north, it's a harder scallop, and to me, it has a little different taste, a richer taste to it.
Well, actually, the main difference is one of the big advantages of us owning the boats is we tend to select out the scallops that have been caught, the last scallops caught on a trip for the fresh production.
Right.
So the first 2 or 3 days, those are already fairly aged and you don't want to actually truck them. So what we try doing is we try selecting the last couple of days of the trip. Because we have our own boats, we know which sacks those are. And those are the ones we tend to pack for fresh because you get better value and you guys get better plate coverage, better quality from it. Good question, you don't get anything. Yes?
Eddie.
Okay, I'll go back again to the price point, okay?
Yeah.
Quality, pretty much right now. My biggest problem when I buy scallops is consistency. I buy U8s and it comes U10s. I buy U10s and it comes the same size as U8s. The consistency for me personally is really bad. I understand there's a shortness, like a third of shortness of the catching the scallops, but it should be like a quality control on the size. I cannot put specials, they're gonna pay $40, $45 per person. You know, when it comes to U10s, they have $30 a plate, you know.
What happens with the fresh product is scallops are very, very delicate, so they have to be graded by hand. When you talk about a U10 and a U8 scallop, a U10 and a U8 scallop means less than 8, less than 10, okay? Sometimes when we're packing scallops, we only have a limited quantity to choose from, and sometimes you get better value from a U10 because a lot of them will be a U8 scallop. Now we do testing to make sure that we try maintaining uniformity, but what I always recommend you do is you have, like, on one side of your plate you have a U8 or a U10, and then maybe you go for a 10-20 because that gives a significant difference in size. The other thing you can look at is, particularly if you're doing like a ceviche presentation, you can use also a frozen like Faroese scallop, which will give you wonderful quality in a ceviche. or else you can use broken pieces. So, you know, you have several different things to choose from. The problem is if you're saying a U8 or a U10, your customer is not going to perceive the difference between the sizes. So I always think it's better to, you know, pardon my French, have a big off.
I do understand they don't see, but they do because, believe me, I deal with all scallops and U8s. I put 4 on the plate, U10s I put 5 on the plate, and you can tell the difference.
Yeah.
The point is like at some point on the year, and again, I understand the shortness, okay? At some point in the year, you can put 4 scallops that looks beautiful, big, you charge whatever you want. But as a customer, I sit down and I see that plate one day, and they come back next month, and you see a U10 sitting there, it is not appealing. I have a lot of regulars, bunch of regulars, they do know the quality that we serve. So it is hard for me to buy scallops, especially U8, you know, because it's not the consistency. I never feel it's there, you know.
Okay, well, what we'll do is, if it's okay, let's talk later, and I'd like to get a better feeling of for what you're doing with regard to uniformity and consistency. Because, you know, if you have an issue, we'd like to solve the issue, but this is a bit complicated to discuss right now, okay? But I'll talk with you later about it.
Hey, yeah, one more over here.
Who do I got?
Uh-oh. He looks like he's a problem.
This gentleman right here?
No, this one is a problem. Don't talk to him.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm educating myself on the
Yes, sir.
cycle, if you will, a seasonal 12-month cycle on scallops,
Yes, sir.
in terms of what's available, wild caught, and then if there's a viable, because I don't know, farm-raised supplement for downtimes and/or weaker periods of supply, and then if that's the case, what the quality variance may be
Okay.
during those times.
What happens is the scallop industry is one of the few industries where the largest amount of scallops caught anywhere in the world is caught in the United States. We're the leader. Okay? Well, I'm English, so we're the leader. So basically, our industry is it for this country. You do get farm-raised scallops. You do get the Hokkaido scallops, which is a
From where?
Hokkaido scallops is from northern Japan. It's
Okay.
a cold water scallop.
On a rope?
No, it's wild caught. It's just the same as
Okay.
us. It tends to be a little bit smaller. It tends to be a little bit softer. It's something that you can tell the difference of. It's a little bit sweeter, if anything, sometimes, but it also tends to be softer, and it's very difficult to handle compared to a U.S. scallop. If you want a big scallop, or if you want a good quality sea scallop, then basically year-round there is a supply of scallops that just goes up and down. There is never a non-availability of scallops, basically. There's always somebody going out getting stuff. Also, we do a refresh program for some customers because it's so difficult to defrost a wild scallop correctly.
Right.
We'll do a very slow defrost on it, and we will put it in a can and we'll ship it. But we don't say it's a fresh product, it's a refresh program for specific customers. Okay, if any questions about that, you know, anything more you want to talk about, I'm available later.
And 2 more questions, and we'll,
Where we at?
Charles right here.
You were talking earlier about the long runs of the boats. I know how a lot of the fisheries and stuff like that preserve the fish and everything. How do scallops? Scallops are delicate, so on those long runs, and you're saying they're shucking them right there on the boat as they're coming in.
Yeah.
How do they?
What happens is they're generally shucked into a water bath, and then they're put into a net. It's like a large net. Sorry, it's a cheesecloth bag. I'm sorry. Technical term. Thank you. It's a cheesecloth bag from northern Italy. No. I didn't interrupt you. It's a cheesecloth bag, and basically what you do is you put it into ice and you store it. But that is why you have to be so selective about what product you ship fresh, because those obviously have the ones that cook first have a fairly short shelf life. And we have the big advantage, we know every bag that comes off there, we know the age of it because it's our boats generally in the fish program. But yeah, the ones that are caught at the beginning of your trip aren't as good quality as the ones caught at the end. They tend to be frozen, but our frozen product is excellent, of course. So,
One last question.
During the season, I see a lot of pink scallops or peachy colored scallops, more so at the beginning of the season than I do at the end of the season. What causes that color distinction?
that is just something to do with scallops. It's just some people have crap on their face, other people don't. Oh, sorry, usually the females are pinker.
Before they spawn.
Okay. I thought it might have to do with the sex, but I wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, it's something to do with sex. A lot of times we'll see a peak, or we see a lot of what we call the pumpkin scallops, and then they'll spawn, and that'll just go.
And they taste exactly the same. Everything's the same. They just decide to make us lose money if there's too many of them. Maybe it's a selective thing that they don't want to give us value, so we don't fish them. I don't know.
One thing, comment a little bit on milky scallops, tell them what that is.
Okay, milky scallops basically is a bit like this lady's talking about the salmon flesh. Sometimes after they've spawned, they've used all their energy banging one another. Technically, that's a technical term. And they're sort of shagged out, so they don't survive so well, so they tend to be a little bit wimpy. And if you've gone out for a bandit for the weekend, Monday morning, your flesh wouldn't be very good. All right?
Oh my goodness.
Thank you.